Hi everybody and welcome back to another video. My name is Richard Seidlitz, aka TLM01, and I'm the owner of Redpants.lol. Today I'm going to show you how to change the steering wheel in an Aston Martin V8 Vantage. So of course, big word of caution, you are dealing with an airbag during this process and it's very dangerous. Make sure that you follow the actual instructions. This is just a guide. When you're doing this job, you need to make sure that you have the battery unplugged or disconnected so that the airbag can't accidentally deploy. So make sure you do that. I will remind you again during the course of the actual installation, but this is extremely important because that will mess your world up badly. So let's go ahead and talk about the steering wheels real quick that I've got. The one on my left is the steering wheel that came with my car. It's the standard all black steering wheel. Some of them have a different color leather on it, which needs. I also have all of the controls down here and down here. Some cars will not have one or either of these. The only real difference on it is whether or not you have the extra wires, which doesn't really matter because it all runs into this one wiring harness anyway, which you're going to have regardless. On my right is the Alcantara steering wheel that's going into my gray car. This one, it's about 1/4 pound lighter, but it's not thicker than the original leather. In fact, it may actually be about 1 millimeter or so thinner than the original one, and I think it's because they do the exact same construction, but instead of using a slightly thick leather, they're using a slightly thinner Alcantara, which is where that thickness difference comes from, and probably that 1/4 pound. So if you're looking for a thicker, like a meatier steering wheel to grab onto, which is what I'll be doing in the red car that I just picked up as my project car, this is not the one for you. This is no thicker, and if anything, a hair thinner than the original leather. What you do get though is you get this Alcantara wrap, which is great for feel. I mean, it's a lot grippier as far as the, it's not as slippery as leather can be, especially if your hands get wet. The downside, of course, is that it will show wear over time. If you've ever seen like an older race car, the Alcantara steering wheels are usually a bit beat up. If you like having road fries or some chicken nuggets while you drive, that's going to be another issue because this will soak up all that grease. And so it is a bit of a, some people aren't a fan, some people are. It just kind of depends on which way you're going with that. Anyway, in the center I have got the airbag module itself. There it is. It's got 2 connectors, which I will show you how to disconnect once we are actually doing this job. It's got these 3 spots on the side, which are these snap fittings that are going to make some scary noises as you're pulling this out. But really this is all it is. There's 2 bolts that are holding this in place. You can see the bolt holes here and here. And what that means for you is that when you're installing this, you'll have the one here and the one there. To get to those, because the steering column is right here, you have to turn the wheel all the way like this so that the bolt that you're working on is above the steering column. Once you've pulled that one out, you go all the way to the other side, and then you can pull out the other one, and then you go back to center. The nice thing about these steering wheels is that it has a simple hexagonal mount to it. I've actually dealt with some cars that have a spline drive for how they mount on the steering wheel, which is horrible because you have to be extremely precise with lining them up or you have to do the whole job over again. So this is actually kind of neat. It's very simple. It's a lot easier to get it right the first time. So let's go ahead and jump into the car and I will show you the actual installation process. Okay, so here we are in the car and let's go ahead and go over how to actually change out the steering wheel. First things first is we have got to get to 2 T30 Torx bolts that are on the back side of the steering wheel. I showed you where those are in the introduction where I showed the 2 steering wheels side by side. Those are on the back side. You can't get to them because the steering column is in the way, so you have to rotate the wheel all the way to the side. So basically it's facing that way, and even go a little bit further so that you don't scuff up the leather on the steering column or the back side of the steering wheel. But the trick to this is you have to put in the key. So if you have the old style Volvo key, put it into position 1. If you have the newer glass ECU key, put it into position 2. This is releasing the electronic steering column lock. That is what locks a steering wheel. If you ever get into a car and you move the steering wheel and it locks in place, that's that electronic lock. By putting the key in, we're releasing that. Once you put either the old key in position 1 or the new key in position 2, you need to disconnect the battery. That's going to prevent the airbag from accidentally deploying while we're doing this.
Once you've disconnected the battery, it's a good idea to wait a couple of minutes just to make sure any residual energy that's in the electronic system has sort of faded away. But once we've done that, we can continue. So rotate the wheel all the way to the side, pull out the the T30 Torx bolts. Here's one of them right here. Just looks like this. Once you've pulled that one out, go all the way to the other side, pull out the second one, and then return to center. You want to make sure that your wheels are facing forward for the rest of this, because if you don't, you can actually damage the system. So those two bolts only serve to hold the steering, the airbag module in place. They don't actually do anything for the steering wheel itself. There's a single bolt that does that, and we'll be getting to that shortly. So once you've done that, you have 3 snap fittings. There's one in each corner of the steering wheel here. And you have just to grab onto it and pull it forward. And you'll get some nasty snapping noises, but here's what it looks like right here. And you can see that just goes into this with these little wing tips that are right there. So the the airbag itself is now held in by these 2 connectors. Once you've popped that loose, don't try to pull it out, because it's still connected by the cables, by the wires. These are a bit different because they don't actually slide on anything. Here you can see that they actually press in. They're going to be flat and they'll look like they slide, but they don't. They actually press in. So that's what they look like. I have no idea how this is going to turn out. I'm going to have like some weird look on the side of my head while doing this. But here's what it looks like there. And on the front side, you can see that you have this yellow tab. It'll be in the down position. You'll flick that up, and that will allow you to press in on the sides here. So these little nubs, you can see it releases that way. So disconnect the 2 of those. The airbag can now be set aside. So this is that T50 Torx bolt that actually holds the steering wheel in place. This connector will be up here. The trick that I have for this is to loosen this bolt up a bit so that there's enough space between the steering column and the steering wheel to where you can drop a small flat-headed screwdriver or even the key. And I'm going to show you with the key just to see. You can push down on that tab. So the key isn't terribly long. You may end up, plus it's pretty thick, so a screwdriver is much better here, a narrow screwdriver. But you can see that's how you disconnect that right there, nice and easy. And then while you're pressing down on that, pull out on this, and that releases the steering wheel's electronic harness. So now we can unbolt this the rest of the way. And you want to be careful because this is indeed spring loaded. It's not a powerful spring, but there is a spring. So, and here's that bolt. Don't let this pop loose. You want to control it as it comes out, because you'll want to guide the airbag wiring through the hole without damaging it. There we go, and we are free. There it is. That's all there is to it. So let's set that aside. Now on this one, as you can see, I have got a piece of blue painter's tape right here. It's just holding the rotary coupling in place. Here's that spring right here. You can see that there is a paint marking showing the upward position of the mounting surface for the steering wheel. There is this coupling here that needs to stay in this position. This needs to line up like this when you're reinstalling it. Having some painter's tape is a good way to keep this lined up because it's not very strong, so you can peel it off without having to worry about getting a lot of leverage. Once the steering wheel is back on, you can still peel this off without having to worry about things getting misaligned. So that's why I like using this stuff. Assembly is basically the same thing in reverse. You want to put the wires through the steering wheel hole, mount it up, make sure that the spring is properly aligned, make sure that this rotary coupling does not move, and then slide that T50 bolt back in there and start buttoning things up in reverse order. So that's it. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, rich@redpants.lol, or the contact page of my website, www.redpants.lol. Thank you for joining me.